Wherever men and women are condemned to live in misery, human rights are violated. It is our solemn duty to come together to ensure that these rights are respected. Father Joseph Wresinski.
People say they're very poor and they're happy that way. It's not true. Nobody's happy about being very poor. We're sick of being poor. We don't want to be poor anymore. We just want to stay here and get on with our lives. We want our rights. The right to a roof over our heads, the right to work, the right to use our skills, the right to learn, especially the right to know things. Fourth World people have a lot of pride. It's our pride that makes us want to shout out to the whole world that we Fourth World people have our dignity.
In rich countries as in poor ones, down back alleys or in shanty towns, wherever you go in the world, you will find families, men, women and children living in abject poverty. Poverty which arises out of the shame that these men and women suffer when they are no longer respected. Whole families survive, exhausted by the daily struggle to find what little they can to get by on until the next day. They're alone, excluded, denied the most basic rights such as shelter, having enough to eat, healthcare and education. They are families who have no voice. Families who do not count. Families who keep going in spite of everything, without ever being noticed. In every age, people have fought on behalf of those who have nothing. In our own time, a new chapter in this story is beginning, because one man, himself born in poverty, has stood up to gather his people around him. With Father Joseph Wresinski, founder of the international movement ATD Fourth World, the poorest families have decided to engrave their own story in marble, to affirm and to set in stone their determination to overcome extreme poverty. A commemorative stone will become the symbol of the courage of these millions of men and women who suffer and who thirst for dignity.
Tu vas comme ça, tu mets pas ton bouton, tu mets pas ton bouton. C'est à côté là. Ah ouais, c'est à côté. Allez, à tout à l'heure. À tout à l'heure, on va, hein.
À tout à l'heure.
Well, I get some electric wire and I burn it, and if there's any metal left, I put it in a bucket. Then afterwards I put it in a bag and go off and sell it. If I do this sort of thing, it's for them, it's not for me. It's to give them something to eat and all that sort of stuff, especially so that they'll have something for Christmas. At least, even if I don't make much money, I always put a bit to one side to buy each of them a toy. I want them to have a better life than mine, to have things, to learn things.
Et puis il y en a plus beaucoup, hein.
No water, no electricity, shut up in this rotten place. We don't get any water unless it rains.
Water's important.
Oh yes, especially water. It's more important than anything else.
Why is that?
So they can wash, to wash our clothes and all that sort of thing. That means that my oldest boy misses school most of the time because I can't do any washing. There's no water. Oh, I try to do my best so that he goes, but there's no way I'm sending him to school dirty.
Have people said things to you then?
About being dirty, you mean? Oh, no, never, no, not at school. Whenever I send them out, they're clean.
Is school important for you and your children?
Oh, yes. He's got to go there or else what's going to become of him?
It's all about the future. But who are these people? Where do they come from? They could be living in any country in the world at any moment in their history. Like all of those who seem to appear from nowhere, they are from everywhere and from every age. They cross our paths in silence, without name or address, with no ties and nowhere to live. One moment they seem to be without work, the next without their children. They are pushed from one place to another. Yet they show us a new way towards a meeting between two worlds unknown to each other. The stone which they have decided to engrave symbolizes their will to meet together to be heard. Each blow on the chisel, each word cut, is a statement in itself. Families of the Fourth World have something to say to us, because they alone experience the daily pain of injustice and exclusion. They are the ones who can show us the way to overcome them.
The hardest thing for me when I lived in a caravan was the way people looked down on me. They didn't understand that I'd just left a house a few doors up the same street to come and live in a caravan. And you know what used to make me really sick was the way they ignored us and looked down on us. They didn't have to judge me. I'd already done that myself. You know, when you live as a couple, you don't really know each other. There's always something you'd call a hidden side of things. It's the same with poverty. People who've never really been poor, well, they can't understand very poor people.
Understanding poverty. The commemorative stone, which is being cut with determination and patience, will become a true challenge to understand the causes of poverty, to attack it at its roots. The more they get to know the men and women who have placed their trust in them and have understood them, the more families of the Fourth World will be able to claim their rights, to express their absolute refusal to be dependent on others.
Soup kitchens, it's just like during the last war. You see all these queues and all of these anonymous people who look at you as you've got the plague. But if you've a decent job and if the kids are accepted and liked at school, well, it all goes together. Our whole family's involved, our whole future's at stake. You only have to be seen there just once. Well, what can you say? When people say, look at her, she's really let herself go. People have got to know that in spite of everything, Fourth World families are trying really hard. You feel really terrible when you get home. You just want to disappear. You're so ashamed. Well, it's shameful anyway, isn't it? It's even more shameful in this day and age, in a country like ours. It's really not right. Well, it's true, before they used to give us old clothes, but I remember what my mother would do. We used to get pullovers. Well, they weren't much, but they kept you warm. My mother used to undo them and knit them up again. Well, like that we could say our mother bought them for us. Well, of course it wasn't true, and if they looked different, you couldn't tell. And we were happy because we could make people believe that our mum had bought them, even though we knew she hadn't. I always had a coat that would be made for a child of 10, so I looked a right idiot, and that marked me for life. Or even. When I did go to school, I couldn't learn. I can still see myself in that coat, or those clothes, the way the teacher used to look at me. Oh, it always made me feel bad. No, it was because of that I never got anywhere at school, because I'm sure I was just as smart as anyone else. There are lots of families whose kids are no more stupid than the others. But they're so humiliated in school that, well, you know, it stays with you all your life. Everything you could have done, like all the other kids, learn things and all that, well, you can't. It's because your poverty weighs you down and people never let you forget it.
And what about you?
Well, we've got our pride, you know. We're not rich, we don't want pity, but we want people to respect us. It's important to us that people respect us. Well, we often say amongst ourselves, when we have our meetings, that we want to be respected. We've got our pride, because we've got the right to live just like everybody else. We've got the right to have people look up to us. A long time ago, I remember when my mother used to take us to the Catholic aid place to get us shoes when ours were worn out. The lady always used to give us one size too big and tell us in a nice voice, well, they'll last you a lot longer. We knew very well that we'd get sore feet walking with shoes like that, but it was better than nothing. My mother always used to say, when you leave the centre, make sure you always hold your head up. Never hang your head in front of anybody. Even if you're poor, you hold your head up. I've always remembered that, even when I've had disappointments in my life. I've held my head up. I've said I'm never going to hang my head in shame, and I've taught my kids the same thing. I tell them, hold your head up. We've got our pride.
Parce qu'on doit avoir une dignité pour nous.
Je viens de faire un grand silence parce que c'est extraordinaire, le témoignage.
These meetings are real people's universities for the Fourth World. Begun by Father Joseph Wresinski, they're places to meet and share experiences. They exist all over the world.
Nous pouvons, eh bien, obliger le pays à changer.
Everyone can share their ideas about changing the impossible lives they lead. Everyone can talk about self-respect and the need to be in control of their own lives, to be recognized as citizens. Here again, poor families can talk about their children and their future. They can also express their solidarity with those who suffer even more than they do. Above all, men and women who would never normally rub shoulders can meet together and talk. Together they forge an alliance which can be seen by all, between men and women who come from very different worlds, but who have a passionate desire to share the things they know and love. The commemorative stone, which they have engraved together, symbolizes this alliance. It was recently set in the Place du Trocadéro in Paris, bearing witness to our common commitment. In a poor area in Paris, a pianist has come to meet the residents. Elsewhere, it might be a computer specialist or a craftsman, or perhaps doctors or young people. Everywhere there is the same drive, the same conviction. True solidarity lies in people's commitment and the sharing of their knowledge and understanding. That is what will make it possible to overcome exclusion and to open up a future for all people. the 17th of October 1987, 100,000 people from all over the world answered Father Joseph Wresinski's call and, for the first time in history, came to pay homage to all the victims of hunger, ignorance and violence. Rich and poor together, 100,000 defenders of human rights, they came to affirm their conviction that misery is not inevitable. 100,000 strong, they proclaimed their solidarity with those all over the world fighting to put an end to deepest poverty. In the heart of Paris, on the Plaza of Human Rights and Liberties, in the same place where the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed in 1948, a commemorative stone was unveiled in the presence of many well-known figures. This marble stone, which we have watched being made, will remind us forever of the lives of all those who are rejected, forgotten and despised in the world. Millions and millions of children, women and fathers. Millions who have died from misery and hunger, and whose legacy we hold. You who were once among the living, it is not your death that I invoke today. In this plaza of human rights and liberties, I bear witness to your lives.
C'est de votre vie dont je témoigne.
I'm a priest. It was my bishop who sent me to the emergency housing camp at Noisy-le-Grand on the outskirts of Paris. I arrived there for the first time on the 14th of July 1956. The families I met reminded me of my mother's poverty. The children who assailed me from the moment I arrived were my brothers and sister. They were me 40 years earlier in the Rue Saint-Jacques in Angers. Since then, the families in that camp have inspired everything I have undertaken for their liberation. They've taken hold of me. They've inhabited me. They've carried me forward. They've pushed me to found the movement with them.
Elles se sont donné une identité en se forgeant un nom, celui de Carmonde.
On that 14th of July 1956, my life was transformed. On that day I promised myself that the world would come to know these families, to get decent housing for them, work for the adults, skills for the youngsters, and schools where the children could at last learn something. That was also the day when I chose the path that I would have to take, so that the poorest families would have a recognized and respected place in the world. I would have to enable them to climb the steps of the United Nations, UNESCO, UNICEF, the ILO, the Council of Europe and the Vatican to make their voice heard. Thanks to the families, I went to the end of this road, and thanks also to the men and women who came to join us.
À des hommes et des femmes qui sont venus nous rejoindre.
Father Joseph, you are the President and Managing Director of Aide à toute détresse. How long has this movement been in existence?
Well, first of all, I'm not the President and Managing Director of Aide à toute détresse. To be exact, the movement began when I was 5 years old. I'd already understood that nothing I could do would amount to anything if there wasn't a movement which had as its basic objective the eradication of misery amongst the most excluded people. Neither did I want to undertake what you might call a charity, like, for instance, giving handouts, because that is what caused me the most suffering during my own childhood. What I felt so deeply in myself, and what I believed to be absolutely necessary, was to enable people to be free through learning and through the sharing of knowledge. And that's actually the reason why I used to talk so much about knowledge, about libraries, about play schools, about all sorts of things. I bear witness to you, the poor of all times, still poor today, forever on the roads, fleeing from place to place, despised and banished. Laborers without a trade, forever crushed by work. Laborers whose hands today have become barren. Millions of men, women, and children whose hearts are still pounding strong to the beat of the struggle, whose minds revolt against the unjust fate imposed upon them, whose courage demands the right to dignity, which has no price. I bear witness to you, so that people will at last fulfill their destiny, refusing forever that misery prevail.
De la misère, la fatalité.